Welcome to the Lead Magnets Podcast, a show for business leaders who want clarity on their marketing direction to help them grow and scale their business to the next level. I'm Julie Nichols, owner of Julie Nichols Marketing.
And I'm Dan Gershenson, owner of Caliber Brand Strategy and Content Marketing. We are two fractional chief marketing officers who lead marketing departments for small and medium-sized businesses who want to level up the playing field and level up.
And today we're talking about what to do in the first 90 days with your marketing.
Yes, the first 10, the first 90, yeah, they're all important.
Guys, I need a vacation. Is it 4th of July yet? We're getting close. Okay, Dan, so I know that this is a topic that you have a lot to say about. So I would love to turn the reins over to you and see how we can start off this conversation. What to do in the first 90 days? I guess my first question is, how do we break this down? So we've got 90 days.
Yeah.
How would you suggest that we break that down into chunks so it's not so overwhelming and we have something of a plan?
Yeah. I think really first things first with sometimes when you think you might, you're engaged with somebody and nothing's happened yet as far as a kickoff meeting. That might happen in, let's just say, 2 weeks or something like that to make it official. It's probably a good time to double check and make sure that does that person, like that marketing person, have all the logins, the passwords, the things that are really important for them hitting the ground running with anything that you've agreed to. And I Julie, I see this like all the time. I've experienced this way too much, and I think people usually expect that'll be like no big deal. Like, oh yeah, it's fine. You'll just get the logins from a client, and in no time you'll be up and running. And I think many times we don't have that stuff retrieved in one place for us.
Yeah, it's never that easy. It's never just like, oh, the passwords. It's so easy. It's like, no, there's always like, oh, well, the last person that was with us made up the password and they left. And so now nobody knows the password, but then we're not even really sure who is the admin. And then I guess we have to call LinkedIn and it's like, oh my God, I can't believe we're in this situation. Help someone.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have seen everything from that person is no longer with us, like the company, to that person is no longer with us, the living.
Oh no!
I mean, and it's just like, oh my gosh, you don't have a person at all here who, besides that person, who knows. So, I think for all kinds of purposes, for security, you want to have that stuff in one secure place. And it really then becomes a lot easier for people like you and me and our teams to be able to say, okay, what do we need we need your website logins. We need your social media, your email, your anything that is connected to your brand, really, I think is going to be a really crucial thing to have right away.
Yeah, and working with using a software that can do that for you. Like, LastPass is one of them. There's I'm not going to say that I don't really know the difference between any of them, but having a service like that where whenever you're working with any kind of contractor, you can share the passwords with them without them actually knowing the passwords, because then they just sign up for the account and they're connected to you so that they can get in where they need to. But then if something were to happen, you can cut them off and then they won't know your passwords.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think that's probably the most underestimated part of prior to starting your first 90 days. Don't spend any of that time, if you can avoid it, trying to get all this information for somebody in marketing. Like, just give it to them in advance, or, it really is a process that should take no more than 2-3 business days. But when they don't have that stuff, it can take a lot longer. And you don't want to spend, nobody wants to spend the first month trying to get all that stuff
Yeah,
up.
no. And then
So,
you talked about the kickoff meeting and the
yeah,
importance of really setting that meeting to really talk about what the plan is.
yeah,
So if your marketing person is not having that kickoff meeting with you, they should be. It's really great to get everybody together for the first time and set some standards for how often are we going to communicate? What's the best way for us to communicate? If we're communicating too much or too little, how are you going to let us know? Like the things that you can do at the beginning to really let your clients know that you mean business and that you're going to be available and that you've got them. Like you have a
yeah,
plan and that those kinds of things are important to you to really set the stage.
yeah.
What are some things you like doing during your kickoff meetings?
Yeah. Well, I think if possible, it's a good moment where you are on the same page as far as their sort of expectations. You may have an overarching idea, but you mentioned it. How often and what are the easiest methods for them for communicating, and that may sound like a very small thing, but it's pretty huge because if somebody is not an email person and they're more of a text person, I've seen this,
Yeah.
or if they're more of a phone, whatever it is, what is their preferred method of communication and work around that. But I also think you want to hopefully just kind of introduce them to a project management system if they're not already using one. Because really, there's no right or wrong one out there. They're all fairly good. It's kind of like CRMs in many ways. It's like as long as you're using it, that's all that matters. So introduce them to what you're using and say, okay, I'm going to invite you into this, and this will be sort of our home base for where all of our official sort of communication is. You can still email, you can still call me, you can do all that stuff, but we're going to keep it all in one place. And it usually doesn't need a lot of training at all. It's more just making them aware that we're not going to just throw emails back and forth because that's where things get lost. So I think that is probably one of the more important things to do right away. And then the other thing is just accessibility is going to matter a lot. So when is the best time to talk to them? When is not the best time? And like you said, it is something where you're figuring out the frequency of is it every week that we'll talk, or say every other week, or maybe start weekly and then go from there. These are small but important things that can really derail your entire relationship if you're not getting that on the same page right away.
Okay. Dan, let me
So,
ask you a question because so far we've been talking about this from the perspective of that you've hired a marketing strategist or a
yeah,
fractional CMO like you and I, and
yeah,
that we're the ones leading this. But what if it's the business owner and they've hired somebody like maybe they hired a copywriter or they
yeah,
hired a content writer, something where they're going to start like how is it different in the first month, I guess, if
right.
they're the ones managing it all?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think you probably want to make sure are they on the same page? Whoever you've hired, do they understand a bit of where your core message is and where you might want it to go? Do they understand who your best customer is right now? Maybe that has to be adjusted, but at least let's get a baseline for that. And if that needs to change, be improved upon, and defined a little bit more, that's fine. But get on the same page. Who are we really talking to as far as best customer or best customers? And then what are some burning things that just cannot be put off?
Yeah,
Like,
what is on fire?
yeah, like you can't say necessarily like, oh, in the third month we'll talk about social media. Well, no, because we've got these channels up. So what needs to absolutely be maintained? Because if you don't really share that information, then suddenly that won't be maintained and it'll be maybe on somebody else's timeline. So just kind of get a sense of, all right, what's hot right now? What can be pushed to month 2 or something like that? Just so we're starting out of the gate and nothing is being dropped. Um,
Mhm.
because you can always add on as you go, but you don't want to be like, oh, okay, yeah, we should probably keep that updated like 3 months down the road. So those are some good places to start.
I agree. And then I feel like if we're talking about the first 30 days, because I feel like in my mind, I would break it down into, first 30, next 30, and then the third 30.
Yeah,
I would say in that first 30 days, it is all about, maintaining things that are already going and making sure that they're still going out at just kind of
yeah,
like the same cadence. Like we don't need to like change anything just yet, but we just need to make sure it's maintained.
yeah,
We also need to dig deep into the brand strategy to figure out like what is still in line with what we are doing, what needs to be changed, or if it doesn't exist at all, we need to develop that. We need to develop, what are your values? What's your purpose? What's your target market? Who's your competition? What's your voice? All of those things and more encompass your brand strategy. And having, I feel like I sound like a broken record, but if you've never listened to our podcast before, this is because I feel like I talk about this a lot in the previous episodes, but it's something where if you don't have your brand messaging clear as crystal and defined, and your brand strategy, all of those components defined, any marketing that you do is going to be a waste of time because you don't know what you're talking about.
yeah,
So that is something that needs to be addressed definitely in the first 30 days. And then a marketing strategy, or basically taking the recommendations from that marketing assessment that you want to do. So
yeah,
if you're not working with someone like me and Dan who are marketing strategists and you're doing this on your own, you really have to, well, first of all, I would say hire us anyway, but so at least meet with us to help us so that we can help you figure out
100%. Yeah, yeah,
right. Because it's so overwhelming for small businesses to be like, okay, I'm going to make a marketing strategy, but how? And
yeah,
what do I put in it? And how do I know what's more important than other things? I would say try to find somebody who would do like a one-off or two-off meeting with you if you can't pay them in, on a retainer basis for the long term and you really just need some right now help. At least get a framework set up on your marketing strategy, because I know, Dan, you and I are on the same soapbox about this, that like if you don't have a strategy, like what are you doing?
yeah, yeah. And it's so easy, I think, to get caught up in the sort of hot things of the moment that are tactics and say, what do you think about this? Should we be doing this? And and you've heard some things. It could be everything from speakers to your kid or whatever about what's hot. And really, the thing that's important is what's the roadmap that's right for you and for who you're talking to and what your goals are. And I couldn't agree more because even as we were talking about, what things need to be maintained, we, at least here, and I'm sure you as well, we're not going to do anything new until we have that strategy done. So, like for example, uh, I used to when I started used to be like okay with if somebody said, "Oh yeah, strategy is important. We just need to do this, and then we'll circle back around to strategy if that's okay." And now I'm like, no, it's not okay. Like we're not going to do that. So the like they would say we really need to get this website up, and uh, if we can do that first, or build it the same time as we're doing strategy, that would be great. No, it's not great, and here's why. You here's what I found in that last time I ever did that was that I found some things about that company based on talking to clients and whatnot that were like, we cannot go out there and say this. Not that it's wrong, but it's not accurate to what our clients think about us. So pump the brakes for a second on this whole website thing and let's actually reflect what they are coming to us for and why they stay with us or why they refer us. And it was it was messy. I mean, it was really something where I was like, this is there's a right way to do this and there's a kind of a half-assed way to do this, and I don't want to ever do it that way ever again.
Yeah.
So I think that's why I insist, you insist on really going with strategy first, no matter what, and then you can worry about what the tactics are.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you and I are totally on the same page with that. And once that strategy is in place and you're like, okay, now we're going to start work. I feel like now we're in like the second 30 days is probably where, at least that's how you and I work, where
Yes.
we don't mess around. We don't like to waste time. We really like to kind of get deep into the brand and marketing strategy within like the first 30 days. Maybe if it's a very large company, that would take up to 60 days. But really kind of moving it along. The next phase, what would you suggest for the second month?
Yeah, so the second month, now we're getting into some of our recommendations that we've had in strategy, and now we're starting to implement maybe some of those new tactics. We're fixing possibly some existing things that are up. So let's say you have a duplicate Google business profile for some reason, or you have some social media claiming issues, or things like that. I hate that should be hopefully month one, but you do want to make sure that's taken care of. But in any case, now we're digging into possibly any kind of website changes. And what I mean by changes are not, we're not talking about necessarily a revamp.
Okay.
I like to avoid that at all costs if I can, really.
Yeah.
But now it's what do we want to do to start to change some of this stuff in terms of content or SEO? And at a minimum, we want to make sure we're in agreement on the outline for it. Some of the existing content optimized based on a keyword plan? Do we maybe want to think about a review funnel? Do we want, of asking for more reviews? And then I also think this is really where you can start to get into blog topics. Sometimes I have done it in month one at the end, but ideally it's month two. We're getting into blogs and those kinds of topics, and it can be a content calendar, but even if you don't have that, really setting aside what's our theme for this month. What are we getting into right away? What types of blogs are we doing around a particular theme that makes sense? And if you're getting that process underway in month two, you're really setting yourself up for success, I think.
Yeah. Um, Talking about blogs, because I'm a big blog fan.
Yeah.
I've had like 10 different blogs. But for those of you out there who kind of, you're like, well, a blog, do I really need one on your site? You don't need one on your site, but I love having a blog on your site if, number one, you have a lot to say, you are like a thought leader in your field and you have unique thoughts. And so if you know you're going to have content out there or you want to educate your ideal client, that's a great way to do it through a blog. But for me, blogs are a great way to keep letting the search engines know that you exist and that you are putting new stuff out there. So,
Yeah.
pretty often people will have their website for their business And for the most part, it just stays the same. That doesn't really help you when it comes to search engine optimization, because when you update your site, the search engines take note of that eventually, and then they know better how to position you. They know better how to show you to the right people and to show you up in the right searches for the right keywords.
I think you're absolutely right with the blog stuff, because that can be such great fuel for what you are going to adapt it for. I think sometimes people just think, let's write this thing, it's going to live on our site, and hopefully Google likes it, and that's that. No, I think you really have to see it as, this is a great master sort of piece of content. How can we make some of that into social media posts? How can we use it in our e-newsletter or e-blast? How can we maybe take video or a podcast from it? You've seen how we do this here, that very thing, and so I think doing the blog is kind of a great sort of thing to build a content system around, so to speak.
Yes. Yes, like the blog can
How can
be,
you adapt it?
it could be like your content hub,
Yes.
where, because some people are more video people. And
Yeah.
so instead, they might make YouTube their main place where they have their content, and then they repurpose that content off of there. But I, as a writer, love doing it on the blog. And that's where the ideas begin. And then they morph from there. They become a LinkedIn post, they become an email. It branches out from there. And then it can be repurposed months down the line, because let's face it, not everybody pays attention, which is great,
Yeah.
because then you can repurpose stuff because,
Yeah.
and not like, but I love taking ideas and not like copy and paste, but like rewrite them with the same theme, because, at the end of the day, talking about just a few things over and over again in different ways really helps people to solidify who you are and what you do in their brain. So they're branding you based on what you're talking about. So if you're talking about a million different topics all the time, they don't really know where to put you in their brain.
Yeah.
But sticking to like 3 to 5 content pillars, as we call them, is a great way to kind of get started. I feel like I'm going, we could probably have like a 10-hour podcast based on how you and I talk and we go off on tangents, but
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I'm really trying to stick to topic, but it's so
No,
hard.
you're good.
But anyway, okay. So let's get into, cause we just have a couple minutes left.
Yeah.
So the last 30 days of the first 90 days,
Yeah.
what do you envision in that period of time?
Yeah, now we are really getting into a routine. We've done some setup for success. Now we're getting down to business as far as the flow of the routine of some things. We're in a weekly or bi-weekly, let's say, blog posting routine. We're posting to social profiles. Might have been doing that, but now we're really, got a nice groove going with social. We may be expanding, let's say, into using video or testimonials or case studies. This is kind of where you can open it up a little bit to some of those, because, again, it's still possibly related to something you already have. So you're not reinventing the wheel necessarily from scratch. And this is where by now, we've made some significant changes possibly to your messaging and positioning. Your website, if again we're not doing it from scratch, has been more updated as far as new content for the website design. So you can see this is kind of why I'm usually a fan of working within what we have, and then you've got the shell of the building. It's fine, but there's probably a lot that we can sort of change around as far as the content, possibly some design stuff, but not a full-scale revamp. And so this is where those things are coming into focus. It's probably now where you could start to measure some things, but also it's really, let's map out, now that we've got this stuff checked off, what kind of upcoming priorities might we think about to expand into what we're already doing?
Yeah. And the analytics piece It really takes about 3 months minimum for
Yeah.
analytics to really show you anything that's going to be worthwhile, because it takes time for Google Analytics in particular to learn this what's going on with your site.
Yeah.
So when you launch your site, make sure you're signing up for a free Google Analytics account, because you have to actually turn it on. It's
Yeah.
not something, because like if you launch your website and they're like, I'm doing my business, and then like months later you're trying to figure out like, well, how many people actually come to my website, or what's the, how do they find me? You're never going to know because you didn't activate Google Analytics. You have to literally go in and connect it to your website and say, I want you to track this website, and then it goes. So make sure you're doing that sooner than later. I would try as soon as your site launches, get it going. Because even if you change your website or you move your website to a different server, the Google Analytics will follow you,
Yeah.
as long as it's connected correctly.
Yeah.
So you definitely want to get that started. And, don't expect huge jumps when you get a new website, because I think that's also a misconception, is that people think like, oh, my website is so great now, it like looks so great, we're going to get a ton of traffic. And you may get that initial bump in traffic because maybe you announced it somewhere, like you announced it on email or you announced it on social. So then a bunch of people are just looky-loos and they're trying to kind of see, whoa, let's see what he did. But
Yeah.
then maybe it kind of dies off a little bit. Like, don't panic. It takes time for the algorithm to really understand your site and understand who they should be showing it to.
Yeah.
So give
And
your website grace.
yeah, a great point, and I think that that holds true for your keywords too, because as you start to get into say an SEO plan, you're gonna really see some volatility possibly. I mean, like almost every day. Like
Oh, yeah.
it can go wild swings. So on your theme of don't panic if one day it drops like 90 places and then the next day it goes up 90 places.
It's like the
It,
stock market
it's
again. Like, you
it,
gotta
yeah.
stay the course.
Well, and I think the thing that's happening there is it's some new information for Google to get a handle on. And really what tends to happen though is it will level off and be normal, but that what is normal is for it to go like this, like crazy in the beginning. So remember, some of that stuff has nothing to do with you. It has sometimes a lot to do with the algorithm changing, particularly if it's a major update. So realize that that is normal. Don't freak out at your marketing person and be like, why the hell are we going up and down like this? No, that is a normal thing. But the only other thing that I think is important here, Julie, is I will say I don't recommend doing, if you're going to do a revamp of any kind of your website and you're really going to blow something up, do not do it in the first 3 months. Like it's just not. You're going to realize very quickly that is a big enchilada to consume, and it could be the biggest bottleneck to everything that you're doing. That if you're going to do it, plan it out, really get a handle on what the schedule is going to be. Know that there's going to be a lot of times where that's going to have to adjust. And this is a process. If you do it that way, it could take, 6 months. It could take a year,
I
depending on
know.
everybody who's got to see it, approve it, whatever. So buckle up for that kind of thing. Do not like kick it off in month 2 and think, oh, we're gonna check that off in 3-4 months. I don't buy it. I don't think if it's not unless it's a 5-page website,
Right.
you're gonna have to really really dig in for that. And
Yeah.
I would not get into that before you are absolutely ready with your planning on that.
Yeah.
Don't do it in the first 90 days for sure.
It's a huge project and it's going to take a long time, and the timing is everything. I totally agree. All right, Dan, we are at the end of our time today. We could go
Cool.
on for
Yes.
another 10
Yes, we
hours, but we
could.
can't right
Yes,
now
we
because you people have places to go. And so thanks so much. And I am Julie Nichols from Julie Nichols Marketing.
And I'm Dan Gershenson from Caliber Brand Strategy and Content Marketing.
And thanks for joining us today. We hope you have a good one.
Take care, everybody.